As Ottawa continues to be absorbed by the China interference affair, is the government and the opposition response affecting voter impression? That is something that we did want to talk about on the program tonight. And joining us right now is polls analyst Éric Grenier, the man behind the Writ.ca. Éric, good to see you. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Happy to be here.
So how much traction is the story actually getting outside of Ottawa? Is it affecting voter impressions, intentions at this point?
Well, I do think it is getting traction in the sense that people are aware of this story and they're following it. We did see some polling by Leger that suggests that 2/3 of Canadians have at least heard of this story, but it doesn't seem to be having much of an impact on voting intentions. We still see the same kind of support for the Liberals, usually around 30-31% support, that we saw before this story broke in mid-February, and for the Conservatives, we're not seeing a big lead for them. We're even seeing some indications that their support has been dropping over the last little while. So it doesn't have a big sign that this is really changing people's views of the parties, but that doesn't mean that it'll stay like that forever. Obviously, this story is going to continue for several weeks, but so far we haven't seen much shift in the polls.
Okay, so it will continue, as you say, for several weeks still, but I do wonder about the boom and the echo effect here. Is it normal to have such a big story on the Hill not affecting voter intentions at this point?
In a way, it is unusual, especially if we think about some of the past controversies that have popped up over the last little while for the Liberals. If you think about the SNC-Lavalin affair with Jody Wilson-Raybould in early 2019, that really tanked the Liberals, and they more or less haven't recovered from that since then. There was also the We Charity controversy that when that erupted, the Liberals were doing quite well in the polls because of the pandemic, but when that story came out, their support dropped. We haven't seen the same kind of thing happen here. So it either suggests that the Liberal support is not going to go much further than this floor, and so a new story like this doesn't really change any minds, or it could be that this isn't something that is changing people's minds, that they're not necessarily putting the blame on the Liberals. And we'll have to wait and see if this will hold, but so far it isn't having the same kind of impact that we saw in these other stories.
Okay, so that has to do with the parties. I'm wondering about the leaders, though. Are we seeing anything in that area? And let's begin here with Justin Trudeau. Are the Prime Minister's numbers being affected by this?
That, I think, is more of a concern for the Liberals. We've seen some polling by the Angus Reid Institute, for example, that Justin Trudeau's approval rating has dropped quite a bit since the fall. In the polling that we've seen as well from Abacus data, the number of Canadians who say they have a positive impression of the Prime Minister is usually now about 30-31%, and that seems to have been dropping by a little bit over the last few months. So we do get the impression that Justin Trudeau's own numbers have been going down. There was a poll even by Nanos Research that was published on Tuesday putting him behind Pierre Poilievre in terms of who Canadians preferred to be Prime Minister. Now, we haven't seen that in all polls. Some polls have show the opposite. But these weaker numbers for Justin Trudeau going forward could have a longer-term impact on the Liberals. Often these personal numbers are a leading indicator of where voting intentions will eventually go.
Okay, I want to pick up on what you said about Pierre Poilievre, though, because if Justin Trudeau's numbers are being affected, his numbers are not going up?
It doesn't seem like they're going up, at least not as much as you would think, considering the issues that have been happening in Ottawa over the last month or two. Pierre Poilievre's numbers are still not very good. His own personal approval ratings are usually quite low in polling, and his disapproval ratings, or the people who have a negative impression of him, is quite high for a leader who has only been in the job for a few months. And you see this especially in Quebec. His numbers in Quebec are particularly bad. So I think that is one of the reasons why we haven't seen a lot of movement in voting intentions, is that a lot of people already have their views of Justin Trudeau, and so that's not really moving things. And a lot of people have a bit of a ceiling on how much they're willing to give Pierre Poilievre, and I think that's what has been holding the Conservatives back. So he has not been able to take this issue and help himself. We'll see if it'll eventually whittle away Liberal support, but the Conservatives aren't coming out better out of this story.
Mm-hmm. And let's also talk about Jagmeet Singh here, because he has figured large in this debate, certainly with the vote, or the decision rather, whether or not to vote along with the Conservatives last night. How are Jagmeet Singh's numbers?
Jagmeet Singh's numbers have always been better than the other leaders, and Justin Trudeau included in that. And his positive ratings, his approval ratings are generally positive rather than negative. We see that from the other leaders, that more people tend to dislike them than like them. We haven't seen that drag up the NDP support, and that's been the case since he's become leader. The NDP has not really been able to move forward very much. We'll see if his role over the last week or so will have a positive impact on his numbers. I think one of of the issues for Jagmeet Singh is that he doesn't get as much attention as everyone else. So it takes a lot more to move the NDP support. But so far, he remains more popular than his two other rivals, but it hasn't really helped the NDP.
Okay. Now, of course, the Prime Minister has appointed a special rapporteur, David Johnston's recommendations. They're due by the end of May, the recommendations on a way forward. I wonder, will pushing that decision down the road actually hurt the Liberals by keeping the issue alive, or could it benefit them by kicking the can down the road, as we heard from a Conservative MP describe it this week?
It is possible that if Canadians aren't all that engaged in this issue, particularly in a partisan way, that putting it off until later in the year won't have much of an impact. But this is also a minority government, so the clock is always ticking on when the next election is. And if it means that a public inquiry is going to take place later rather than sooner, the timing might not work out very well. And also there will be the testimony we'll see from Katie Telford at the committees. So there will be a lot of other things, I think, that are going to make almost Mr. Johnston's recommendation seem like a non-event when they come out in May. But certainly if this story can drag on in a way that people start to forget about it, that'll be better for the Liberals probably. But I don't think that'll be the case. And the longer the story goes on, the closer that it will be to a next election. And that is just a wild card that the Liberals can't predict what kind of impact that would have on the campaign trail.
Eric, really appreciate the insight. We'll speak again soon. But for now, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
That's Éric Grenier.